Washington's arid Yakima Basin is the most intensely irrigated area in the country.
There's already more users than there is water.
Everybody wants water in the desert, which is where we're at.
500,000 sun-baked acres depend on rain and snow to fill mountain reservoirs, flow from the Yakima River and its tributaries, and funnel into an intricate system of irrigation canals. This water grows the produce to fill bins at grocery stores, nourishes hops for beer, and grapes for wine. And of course, for Washington's famous apples shipped around the world. Agriculture in this irrigated oasis is a $3+ billion industry. An industry slashed by 1/3 in one drought year. With no snow and record heat in 2015, water for irrigation had to be rationed for some farmers.
This is very low. This is about 1/3 the normal of water.
For others, shut off completely.
Trees and vine crops, such as grapes and hops, they need water every year to stay alive.
1 year without water, and you're starting over from zero.
The system is stressed. It's not just stressed for farmers, it's stressed for fish.
Because we don't have all that snowpack and that ice, a lot of rivers are running really low. Got one. There she goes.
Endangered salmon and steelhead struggled to return to spawn, and the fear drought is no longer a once-a-decade dilemma, but the impending new norm.
Climate predictions tell us it's either going to be warmer and wetter or warmer and drier, but in either case, warmer means less snow. That winter snow makes up for more of the water supply than these reservoirs do. And without that winter snow, then we have a water shortage.
It's critical that we have additional water supply. This is not something that we can conserve our way out of.
If there's no action, if there's no significant action done to improve conditions, the future's pretty bleak.
You know, there's a lot of farmers out there deciding what they want to let die. If we had another reservoir or more water, you know, they might not have to do that.
The Yakima Basin Integrated Water Resource Management Plan aims to provide that. It's a 3-phase, 30-year proposal getting national accolades for the diverse, unlikely group that collaborated and compromised to create it. State and federal agencies, city and counties, farmers and irrigators,
Chinook,
the Yakima Nation, and conservationists.
In the past, it's always been, no, we won't deal with the tribes, or no, we won't deal with the environmentalists.
They had been fighting each other, all the interests for so long. Nobody was getting what they wanted. They were able to stop anybody else from getting what they wanted, but they couldn't get what they wanted either.
We can't get there without each other, and I think that was a big message for all of us.
For their support, each interest group gets a project in return. New protected lands for environmentalists and the tribe, along with fish passage on dams and habitat restoration, which in turn benefits the recreational economy.
We want to see lots of cool, clean water in the river.
For farmers, a new dam and reservoir in this sagebrush-covered canyon, better water access, and bigger lakes.
My understanding is that with the proposed dam, the level of the lake when it's full will rise about 66 feet, which I think is about the height of these trees that we're looking at.
Putting in a higher dam doesn't make more water. We can't create water.
Despite a broad coalition of support, there are pockets of people
There's an Engelmann spruce.
concerned for the history that could be lost if all the projects move forward.
When they put a new dam in, this is gone. Yeah, it makes me sad.
It's not morally acceptable for me to destroy things to get more water until we use the water we have. Well, that's not right.
What they're arguing is that a lot of other people, like the state of Washington and the federal government, owe them pretty much, well, very inexpensive water, just as one of sort of a right of doing business.
And of course, what hasn't been mentioned yet.
I love that they did a coalition, but they were kind of spending other people's money.
And the price for all of this, $4 to $6 billion.
I think people ought to pay attention to this because this is money if we're going to spend it on dams in eastern Washington, or are we going to spend it on schools?
If you're going to put your resources anywhere, you're wise to put it into this because there's a chance that 100 years from now or 200 years from now, there may not be the opportunity to grow crops anywhere except the Pacific Northwest.
Harvest begins at daybreak at Frank Lyle's cherry orchard in Prosser. These van cherries at their gorgeous June peak.
Most of the cherries on this branch here and on this tree have pretty good size, and they have a nice sheen. They're very firm.
The delicate clusters, picked by hand, placed in bins, and stacked for pickup.
Each one of these lugs is about 30 pounds. We'll put it in cold storage tonight, and then sometime either this weekend or in the next week, it will travel over to a farmer's market that we participate in over in Puget Sound. It's a significant and very profitable market for us. What we're hoping to get out of a box of cherries like this is between $1.25 and $1.50 per pound back to us. You get paid to produce large, dark, sweet cherries. The larger black cherries are, that's a function of the amount of water.
Lyle's orchard and vineyards are thirsty. They're planted in the Rosa Irrigation District, one of the first to lose its share of the Yakima River during droughts.
It's pretty desperate here. I'm looking at getting a third to maybe a bit more of the usual amount of water that I would put on these trees here. We rotate through. Generally, we don't irrigate the whole 80 acres at once. We'll irrigate a certain portion of it, but every day.
What I'm going to do now is check the volts and amperages that my pumps are putting out. That'll tell me how much water I have going up the hill. Make sure that it's where it's supposed to be and start making deliveries. This one is running about 72 amps.
Ryan Hazard is a ditch tender with the Rosa Irrigation District.
I have to keep the grates clean on the front of the plant, and if it gets plugged with weeds, obviously the water can't go through there.
Hazard's job is to get the thousands of gallons of water flowing in this canal delivered to farmers in the Yakima Valley.
We'll go to the low head weir and make sure that it's running the level that it should, and then I start running it out and just making sure there's no deliveries that are plugged or blocked, or if I have any changes to make, I make them. So this is a pipe section. This is pipe just a little ways, and then it goes to open ditch. We'll go down the way and I'll show you the open ditch part of
it. This resource is so coveted, it's stored under lock and key.
There's people that do stuff on the laterals. I've seen everything from people filing the blades down to get more water. I've seen people bend the gates. People that are left unlocked will open them and take whatever they want. So we try to keep everything locked up the best we can so nobody can mess with anybody else's water. And that's their allotment.
Chinook. At Priest Rapids Dam in Mattawa,
Chinook.
Brian Salskin and his workers with the Yakima Nation Fisheries are after a specific type of salmon.
Sockeye. 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 This is part of our reintroduction program. We're reintroducing adult sockeye back into the Yakima Basin. On the other side of this wall is the fish ladder. Out there's a series of gates that we close on the ladder. We close those gates. The fish can't swim up the ladder any longer, so they have to swim into the adult trap. We open this gate, and this is the gate to the Daniil. And we start up the water pump up on the Daniil, water flows down the denial, creating a traction flow, and the fish have no other alternative. If they want to move up, they have to swim up the denial. Once they get to the top of the denial, they have no other course but to drop down into the flume. Chinook. Everything else that we're not collecting, we send it back out to the ladder. Sockeye.
The sockeye slide down to holding tanks, some tested for DNA.
We kind of find out which ones are actually succeeding, getting out, spawning, getting out, and then returning as adults.
Those not randomly selected, loaded into a tanker truck.
Each truck can hold around 200 fish, and then we transport them.
This giant traveling aquarium takes the sockeye on a journey they can't swim on their own. A trip that once took their ancestors weeks, just 2 hours from the Columbia River to Cle Elum Lake.
We put them in a lake, and the first thing they want to do is go back to something that's familiar to them. They can't do that once they're in a lake because of the dam. So they're basically stuck in here, and if they want to survive, they're going to have to go up and spawn, and which they do in September and October. And so then their offspring will be wild in this system, and they're the ones that'll want to come back here, and they're the ones that have came back.
Salskin is honored to be part of this one-of-a-kind reintroduction.
This is a species that's been missing from our waters for over 100 years. And it's something that's not only missing physically, but also spiritually. The fish, they represent who we are. They kind of give us identity.
Sockeye, spring chinook, and coho once thrived in the Yakima Basin, using rivers to migrate to and from the ocean, nourishing the Yakima tribe along the way.
We traded with tribes from over on the west side all the way out to the plains, down to Northern California, all the way up to Southeast Alaska. And trade we were well known for trade. Our livelihood and our way of life has always been tied to the land, to the water, and to what the water provides.
But those same waters also appealing to early Yakima Valley settlers, lured by fertile land and the promise of irrigation from Bureau of Reclamation dams like this one, constructed in 1933.
We knew back then we didn't have enough water for all the activity and all the farming that we had planned. And so when the Bureau came in and built this reservoir, it was prior to the Endangered Species Act, it was prior to a lot of environmental regulations. And so really the focus was on just irrigation water.
The problem with this dam and every major dam in the Yakima Basin is they were built in the early part of the 20th century without any fishway. And so they virtually overnight eliminated all the fish runs in the headwaters of the Yakima.
Jeff Tayer recently retired from Washington's Department of Fish and Wildlife.
It's a labor of love.
But won't quit working just yet.
40 years ago, or almost 40 years ago, when I started working in this basin, we were really trying to hang on to any salmon in the Yakima Basin.
Come gather round me and I'll sing you a song.
His first day on the job,
I'll tell you a story of people that were strong.
As an enforcement officer, caught in a riot during the fish wars of the 1970s, when Native Americans battled for their fishing rights. Today,
there's the flume.
Tayer works alongside the Yakima Nation on projects like this temporary passage to get the new sockeye out of the lake.
As soon as the water drops down, it dewaters it and it doesn't function. In an irrigation reservoir, the water level comes up in the winter and spring and goes down when irrigators are using the water. So you have to build a fishway that will accommodate that rising and falling effort.
So what we're looking at here is a scale model of the helical fish passage facility.
A first of its kind fish passage design and the first major capital project of the integrated plan. It took Bureau of Reclamation engineers years to test and vet just the perfect shape that protects the fish on their fast journey.
So there's going to be a large structure out there, 700 feet long, going down the bank that would allow for fish to be able to escape the reservoir at different elevations. So as the reservoir is filling, fish will be able to continue to go out, and it skims the fish right off the surface, off the top 10 feet. Basically takes up the head difference between the reservoir here and the river down there, which can be over 100 feet, takes up that energy so that the fish are able to travel safely downstream of the dam.
Fish passage here at Cle Elum Dam was authorized by Congress in 1994. Hasn't happened. It's just about to happen now. And it's happening now because of the integrated plan.
We still got a ways to go.
Phil Rigdon says the Yakima Nation is relentless in its fight to restore salmon, citing treaty rights and its water right, the oldest in the Yakima Basin.
We've had decades of saying we want fish passage here. We've gone to court. We already saw this, the loss of sockeye, the loss of summer chinook, the loss of coho and these things. And the tribe said the states and feds aren't going to do this. We have won the Bolt decision. We were sitting here, we finally got the right to have to fish, but what good is a right if there's no fish? There's the fish facility.
The tribe took on an active role of building its own fisheries, like this one at the Rosa Dam.
We'll gather all the fish that are migrating up to the river. They get dropped back into the river, and the ones that we take for our supplementation facility, we'll transport them up to the hatchery. Or if they're sockeye, we'll transfer those all the way up to Lake Cleom and put those in the river.
But without fish passage, Rigdon says this alone would never be enough. So for their part of the integrated plan, the tribe negotiated fish passage at Cle Elum and at several other key dams.
That's the great thing about the integrated plan is it's not just about building reservoirs, it's about looking at the avenues to enhance and what are those major blocks in the fisheries. Some of that will be more water, some of that's going to be habitat work on some of the main stretches on the Yakima.
We had to come together to be able to do something like this.
As sockeye spawn once again in cool headwaters above Cle Elum Lake, Salskin says hopes rest on their offspring.
They need a lake system to survive, and basically they're the only species of salmon. Once their fry hatch out of the eggs, they swim straight to the lake and they utilize the lake as a nursery.
After a year, the smolts travel downstream to the ocean, mature for 2 years, and hopefully return to spawn. They'll still need assistance getting back over the dam, but a new collection system at the base will make it a much shorter trip.
We want to see the Yakima Basin flourish again with once carried close, nearly 1 million salmon at one point. We're excited when we get over 25,000 salmon returning. And we're hoping to see the hundreds of thousands.
Everything will be raised, and the new fishway will be out there.
And that new fish passage?
This scale of restoration is one of those once-in-a-career kind of things.
The one last project Taylor wants to see through.
If we have 100,000 sockeye in Lake Cleom, the fishery here that's going to develop, the sport fishery, is going to be spectacular. Imagine the folks from the metropolitan area, Seattle, coming to the sunny side of the hill, this beautiful scenery, beautiful lake, and catching salmon here.
Do you want to fish this cliffside here? See that little slow spot on the right side? Most of the guides hit that up. You did? You son of a gun. Oh, get us into this slow spot and I'll drop the anchor.
The upper Yakima River
would you look at that?
Already attracts anglers.
Got him. That guy's big. Yeah, he is a little hogger. Oh, and the hook just spit right out. Would you look at that? That's a nice looking fish. Holy crap. There we go. And he's heading home. Ready to keep cruising down?
These are Washington's only blue ribbon trout waters, navigated by top-notch guides like Cam Johnson and Noe Perez from Red's Fly Shop.
Try and get a little closer.
Fly fishers are drawn to the gorgeous canyon scenery and, of course, to the fish.
Got one. There she goes.
Hiding in the sweet spots along the shore.
You get the big boy, I get mini-me. Just a little whippersnapper. The hook's off. It's just caught in the net. Awesome. See those rocks there? No? We'll aim for that. The river temperatures stay cooler here over anywhere in the whole Northwest because we have 3 reservoirs that are nice and deep, nice and cold. So the Yakima River is the one river that you can fish all year round, drought or no drought.
It's really hard to hear that when we hear that the only opposition is a handful of disgruntled cabin owners, and I guess I would be one of those.
Susie Sear and her neighbors on Bumping Lake have much more to lose than views. Unlike Lake Cochise, where a new outlet will allow irrigators to draw down the water in drought years, spoiling summer views and maybe property values, families on Bumping Lake wouldn't have a view at all. Where these 16 homes sit, completely flooded by a bigger lake, including the Sear cabin.
I absolutely fell head over heels in love with this place first visit. It was, at the time, the cabin was very run down, kind of falling apart, musty and old smelling, and I didn't care. It was wonderful.
It's more like a museum now.
I guess the walls are imbued with a lot of history and a lot of stories told around the table.
That table, the benches, the signs.
This was the Forest Service sign for the original Bumping Lake Resort. Really, nothing has been touched. The living room was built for plenty of people to gather.
And much of it remains original, lovingly restored to its 1930s glory. This place is pretty amazing.
Yeah, I shouldn't even say thanks because I have nothing, we didn't build it, we're only taking care of it and preserving it and keeping it here for other people to enjoy. This cabin was built by Jack and Kitty Nelson, and Jack was the original dam tender, and they ran a little resort here with cabins up on the hillside that they rented out to all sorts of folks and a lot of people from Yakima. People come by here regularly and knock on our door and say, oh, is this the old Bumping Lake Resort? Because I used to stay here as a kid.
The cabin is on Forest Service land. The Sear family bought the building in the 70s and worked to get it listed on the National Registry of Historic Places, hoping to pass it to their children.
They feel like they're part of this place. They feel as much as the trees and the plants, they feel rooted here. When they come back to visit, and they're all over the world right now, the first place they want to come back is here.
It's surrounded by these wonderful forests. It's hard not to love the place.
Miles McPhee doesn't own a cabin, but has just as much of a connection.
Our first family camping trip when I was probably in about the 5th grade was up just across here on the shore of Bumping. We used to come up here and fish and water ski, and it's always been a really wonderful place. In fact, my father, when he was in high school, came up here and skated on this lake and went over to the Nelsons, who was the dam keeper, and they served them hot chocolate. I've always heard that story.
Today, he shares the trips with his wife, Sondi.
We like to kayak up here and swimming.
And at a quick 40 miles from Yakima, so do 18,000 other adventurers each year.
Oftentimes, if you want a weekend camping site, you need to reserve by February.
If the dam and lake are expanded as planned during a later phase of the integrated plan, these campsites will be gone.
The Forest Service has said it is doubtful that they can relocate this campground because of the steep hills, and the lake will go right up to those steep mountainsides.
My understanding is that with the proposed dam, the level of the lake when it's full will rise about 66 feet, which I think is about the height of these trees that we're looking at.
Flooding the campground, marina, homes, and trails.
This blue line marks the limits of the new reservoir. But up here is where the really spectacular old growth grove is. And you know, these are really amazing old trees, and that will all be inundated.
We'll see up ahead, there's Engelmann spruce coming up.
Tucked in this forest around Bumping Lake.
Look at these layers of trees, it just keeps going.
And some are 300 to 500 years old.
The value of a tree like this intact in the forest is the impact that it has on the surrounding forest and the area. It provides shade for the whole area, which cools the streams and creates habitat, or sustains the habitat with the cold waters that the fish need.
When they put a new dam in, this is gone. Yeah, it makes me sad.
To me, it's not even personal. I care because I come up here and visit, but to me, it's the bigger picture of losing this to the world and to everybody.
The Integrated Plan's environmental review admits the loss of the old growth forest would be difficult, even impossible to offset.
There's so few areas left like this that if we keep chipping away and take a small part of it here and soon we have none. And to have none to me is not acceptable. You can't keep taking away what can't be replaced. There's an Engelmann spruce.
Sarah's deep into research on Bumping Lake for her book and found replacing and moving the dam downstream isn't a novel idea.
5 times we've looked at this, and 5 times it has not gone forward. The dam didn't get raised because it doesn't work. Putting in a higher dam doesn't make more water. We can't create water. It was built this size because this is the size that the watershed could provide for. This is the right size of dam for the right place. It fills every year. If we build a higher dam, it won't fill.
Sear says several studies done over 50 years show it would take at least 3 years for the lake to fill to the new height.
One of the many reasons it didn't happen was the siting of the dam itself is on an area where there isn't bedrock to tie into. And so they do core drilling, and the core drilling was done as far back as 1965. And there isn't suitable soils to tie into. You can't build a safe dam. And so again and again, they've abandoned because of fatal flaws with the plan. Plan hasn't changed, the geology hasn't changed, the habitat destruction we're talking about hasn't changed, and yet we're looking at it again, and we're wasting more taxpayer money and time fighting this.
It's not a good idea. It doesn't pan out economically. The integrated plan overall says that their benefit cost ratio is positive, but that's based entirely almost, well, like 80 to 90% on the benefit of restoring an anadromous fish run to the Yakima Basin. If you actually just look at the economics of this one dam in isolation, which the Water Research Center at Washington State University did, the benefit to cost ratio is about 0.18, which means it returns about 18 cents for every dollar spent. So it makes no sense from that standpoint.
While environmental groups involved in developing the integrated plan support the Bumping Lake expansion, the Sierra Club does not. Critics feel homeowners and taxpayers were excluded from the planning process and feel Bumping Lake was part of a deal, a trade for the Teanaway, in order to convince conservationists to agree on the rest of the plan.
This was not a trade for Bumping Lake.
It was selected because, as opposed to a whole new dam and a whole new reservoir, raising an existing dam has less impact than a brand new one.
Past iterations of bumping were much, much larger. This is a very scaled down increase in volume. And it was done as we looked at the impacts associated with inundation. We tried to pull back the footprint to a point where we thought the impacts would be manageable.
Sanderson says the expansion is not a for sure project. Years of more environmental review, feasibility studies, and permitting are ahead. But he stands by it, saying Bumping Lake is the key to a more reliable water supply and added capacity.
The runoff to storage ratio right now is about 6 to 1, so there's excess runoff in the basin that's not captured in this relatively small reservoir. It's about a 33,000 acre foot reservoir.
Bumping Lake is on the Natchez Arm, a tributary of the Yakima, and could allow for more flexibility in releasing flows.
Storage is a necessary part of this plan because we need enough water for summers like this when we have a drought. And we're not talking about just water for out-of-stream uses and irrigation, but also water for in-stream, for the fish, so that we could have the flows that are necessary to have the salmon get out of the basin, but as well as the cool enough water for them to get back. And that's where the cooler water is at.
This year, we didn't have a big snow runoff event where the river, went into, when we get all the snow melt in the spring, this river can go to 3 or 4 times the size that it is right now. And that's critical to happen in the springtime for the salmon and steelhead, because those big pulses of water that come down the river would actually flush the salmon smolt out to the ocean. So as long as we have the capacity to do that, then we can do that artificially, even if we need to in a drought year like this.
It's kind of like we're the low-hanging fruit. There aren't very many people that are affected. There's very few property owners here. So this is an easy grab.
It's unclear where the cabins would be relocated and if the Forest Service will pay.
We've gotten really mixed messages about that. Selfishly, we thought, well, if they ever raise the dam, maybe we'd have waterfront property, that we'd just move up a little ways, and that's not an option. We have been told that there won't be recreational properties on the new lake shore. Never again. And to tell you the truth, as much as I feel for this cabin, and I love it as much as my own family, I feel more for the bigger area. There's a legacy to be passed on, not just in the buildings here, but in the forest here. And I feel really strongly about passing that on to my kids and their kids, and keeping this area as it has been forever. It's worth it. Yeah, it's a great place. He loves this place.
You know, I understand if I owned a cabin on Bumping Lake and it was going to be inundated by a new dam, I probably would be quite unhappy about that. But when I weigh that against the future of salmon runs and agricultural economy in the Yakima Basin, I think it's a worthwhile trade-off.